Hey, it's Mike here, and today we got some vegan good news, just a spread across the board of random stuff that's good, because really, we've had quite a bit of not so great news as vegans over the last year or so. I mean, we're talking about restaurant closures, which can be a little bit depressing, but we have good news on that front. There was also the flopping of some larger vegan meat companies, but we have good news on that front as well. And I will say, looking around for stories, I quickly realized I could not fit all the good news in this video, so left out a bunch of stories. You're welcome to always share them below, but let's just go. And while I did do this 4 years ago, I think I was subconsciously inspired by Marielle of Totally Forkable, who does a bunch of good vegan news segments, so shout out to her. Much more newscastery than I am. Very funny and well done. And so let's start with some shorter stories. First of all, Unity Diner, that very popular vegan restaurant in London that had closed recently. It's associated with Earthling Ed, is coming back from the dead, rising like a vegan zombie. Apparently, between renegotiating rents with their landlord as well as getting some extra investment, they're gonna be right back up and going, which is great because everybody loved them. In vegan bad news, I just spilt a bunch of water next to me. And then another piece of US restaurant news, which is good that I didn't see anybody write about, but I heard personally, was that Chloe, the restaurant in New York City by Chloe Coscarelli, the one who won that cupcake competition with vegan cupcakes years back and then had legal fights over her own brand by Chloe, apparently is doing really well and getting a lot of business, so that was awesome to hear. Next, you might have heard that we can't all go vegan and eat more plant-based foods because we would lose so many jobs in the whole animal agriculture sector, etc. Well, Faunalytics commissioned a third-party report to investigate this, and they found that no, actually, job numbers would go up when shifting away from animal agriculture to plant-based agriculture. So at the core, they're really claiming that plant-based agriculture for humans specifically requires more workers than animal-based agriculture. So that's what they say. They looked into two scenarios and they claim that both would create more jobs. Anyway, moving on to a recent study asking, what do people eat to age healthier? And you guessed it, plants. This was a study on 105,000 people using 30 years worth of data. It was by Harvard scientists as well as others. And they looked at a few indexes, in fact, a bunch of indices, and they looked at healthy aging as having good mental and physical health as well as not having chronic diseases at the age of 70. And they found that people eating higher on a plant-based diet index were 45% more likely to achieve that healthy aging. And then they also had another index, which in my opinion is another roundabout plant-based eating index called the Alternative Healthy Index, which was developed to prevent chronic disease and emphasize fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, and healthy fats while limiting red meat, refined grains, and sugar. They say that participants with the highest quintile of this AHEI score were 86% more likely to reach the age of 70 in good health and 2.2 times higher chance of aging healthfully to 75 than those with the lowest score. I was kind of looking and I was like, why did this score do better than the healthy plant-based diet score? And right there, it appears that they, for whatever reason, didn't include sodium as a negative point for the healthy plant-based diet index, which from their chart of foods that were good for aging and bad for aging, sodium was the third worst, followed behind by total meat and trans fat. Anyway, right on to the next one, which it's a little bit dystopian maybe, but also positive in some ways, and that is that bug bots are really coming along. According to the MIT researchers, they now have 100 times the flight endurance that they previously did, and apparently they will be commercially viable within 5 years. That's just a projection though. They're really a response to reports of declining bee populations, and yeah, again, dystopian, but they can work in situations where bees maybe couldn't, temperatures, conditions, etc., as well as survey in ways that bees can't, like look at soil quality, stuff like that. So you may have heard the claim that without bees, we would survive about 4 years. Well, with these fake bees, we could live without nature entirely. Soon, every insect you look at, you'll have to question whether it's a tiny robot or not. It's great for paranoid people. Another good piece of news, it appears that they have a good plant-based gelatin alternative. We've been culturing gelatin proteins, Geltor has, but this is totally different, fully plant-based. A recent study really looked at the different qualities of it, how it compares to gelatin, and it performed really well on things like stretchiness, which is hopeful. And it's made from gum tragacanth, which is from sap from leguminous trees, and it's already been used in traditional Indian cuisine for a while, so no question about health safety. And then in terms of meat meat companies. A few weeks back, the company Moza Meats, which is known for making cultivated beef products, so lab-grown meat, they love to use that term to scare people, crowdfunded 3.5 million euros, surpassing its 1 million euro goal. And we have a couple interesting other points. First of all, that it is aiming to do the cultivated animal fat market first in Europe, which is going to be really interesting, working on regulations there. And then also, they have already raised $120 million as a company in recent years. And next, we have some good news on the development of a vegan snail mucin. It's already happened and is in Bioma's products. Snail mucin is a huge ingredient in the beauty world, so this is massive, and we're getting reviews. This phytomucin glow serum is not just a game changer, but does exactly what it promises, so replacing snail mucin well, which is, it's really just gross. I don't even know how many snails it takes to make an ounce of mucin. And as Plant-Based News mentions, it's something that's often marketed as cruelty-free because you're not directly harming the animal in ways that we conventionally call it harming, but it could stress out the snails, etc. And next we have Cory Booker, who has been vegan for 11 years now, since 2014, and he's actually been vegetarian since 1992. He's 55 years old, and as a senator, he just gave the longest speech in US recorded history at 25 hours long. I don't care what your politics are, that's just a huge feat of human stamina. And late night show Stephen Colbert joked that he was fueled by chickpeas.
And keep in mind, Cory Booker is a vegan. He did 25 hours fueled by chickpeas. This is historic.
And Carnivore Channels covered this with the title, "Vegan Has to Give Up Speaking Due to Being Weak." And of course, in his speech, he had to say the word vegan because vegans just can't shut up about it. No, he just made a joke to Adam Schiff, another senator, that Adam had doubled the number of vegans in the Senate, which is, of course, Cory and him, just to 2.
You, my friend, who doubled the number of vegans in the Senate.
So yeah, we just talked about veganism for roughly 25 hours, something I could also easily do. No, I'm joking. He really did not talk about it very much. It was a speech meant to protest the current administration, separate topic. But one of his other senators, Tammy Duckworth, who I didn't know lost both of her legs as a helicopter pilot after being hit by an RPG, that's a side note there, said this.
I don't know what kind of food you eat on that vegan diet of yours. Yeah. But I need to figure out more of that vegan diet.
Cory says that he did not go to the bathroom the whole time, which I'm like, oh my gosh, holy crap, no, no pun intended. But this does add some perspective to Cosmic Skeptics claim that he had to quit a vegan diet because he had to go poop too much, which, it was more complicated than that, but I just couldn't help but think of it. Yeah, it's just an incredible, again, feat of endurance, and sort of harkens to how a lot of athletes have decided to go at least on a plant-based diet to try and help with endurance. For example, we had Scott Jurek, an ultramarathoner who ran, 127 miles in 24 hours on a vegan diet. Maybe it's lower inflammation, maybe it's healthier artery function or some other health benefit. Maybe it's Maybelline. Nope, it's not Maybelline. I just found out Maybelline is not vegan. So how did he actually do it? He did it by fasting going into it. So he was already fasting a bit, which is wild, but not drinking any water was pretty crazy in my book. I would have just jerry-rigged some type of pee tube system because I'm going to stay hydrated. I feel like he was dangerously dehydrated. But someone with pee tubes would probably have to pee while speaking, which would have been really interesting. You think people could tell when they were peeing? Trickle-down economics does not work. Trickle-down economics does work. And moving on to the next one, which is a massive blind taste test of animal-based meat products versus plant-based meat products. This is the Taste of the Industry by Nectar, and they had Grist saying, quote, "These vegan meat brands taste almost as good as the real thing. Taste tests prove it." As we'll get into, it does expose where there's room for improvement, but I'm pleasantly surprised. And for the actual report, they say, quote, "Through blind sensory panels with over 2,600 omnivores and flexitarians, this report objectively compares plant-based products to conventional counterparts." They bring out plates of the products, and then they essentially ask people the main question, how good does it taste? But then they add other questions on top of that, saying how is the flavor, how's the texture in particular, what is the likelihood that you would purchase this product, important information. They did this for 5 to 10 products of each of these categories that you can see here. So more specifically to the results, I will say overall, the animal products did do better. That's what people are used to. But they say many products are worth celebrating. 20 products were awarded in particular for being rated the same or better than the animal benchmark by at least 50% of the people. It also also highlights room for improvement. We're talking about things like vegan steak not doing quite as well and vegan bacon doing the worst, which I will say, I don't even buy vegan bacon anymore. Like, it's really not that good. However, in the UK, I've had some good ones. And I should note that this looked at US and EU products, but found that they were roughly the same in terms of satisfaction. And for particular reviews, apparently they need to work on the plant-based options being more juicy, perhaps more savory, and working on the aftertaste, sometimes being described as weird. But I would say, as somebody who is vegan, if I end up accidentally getting something with animal products in it, I'm like, what the heck is this weird aftertaste? Thankfully, that hasn't happened in a very long time. And it is a case that the products that scored better in terms of taste also had a higher market share. They were selling more, which I can't help but think, yeah, they're the more processed ones, or the higher salt ones, the higher fat content ones that are more similar on paper and on the nutrition label to these meat-based products. So they're not necessarily the ones that I would go for, but I absolutely understand the utility. And then I can't help but think about perception. I don't know if these people were told ever, even at the end, that some of these products were vegan, but there's them saying that they might buy it, and then there's them actually deciding to buy it knowing that it is a vegan product and it's not made from an animal. So I would love to see if they did a before and after disclosure of the product. Have them taste it, ask them what they think, and then say, hey, that was the vegan one. What do you think now? Because we saw that sausage master eating that Greg sausage saying that the real one was the fake one and the fake one was the real one. Being literally wrong, and then the moment he was told that, he said that the one he thought was better tasted like cardboard, the vegan one, like totally psychological. But that's why it's good that it was a blind taste test. Anyway, moving on to the environmental category with this study, which found that replacing essentially animal agriculture with plant-based agriculture in the US would sequester a lot of carbon, something I've been saying for a while. The main finding was that grass-fed beef is even worse than industrial US beef in terms of emissions, even with optimistic carbon sequestration figures from studies or carbon capture. They say between 3 and 40 times worse than other proteins, those plant ones, of course, being the best. Then they went through a couple scenarios in which they just replaced the beef that exists in rangelands or these grasslands, or the beef that exists in cropland area with plant-based protein. So that's a couple different scenarios here, and of those rangelands, we're talking about sequestering between 85 and 195 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and for those croplands, we're talking about between 260 and 400 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And we're also talking about a ton of land cleared up that they say they could rewild, which has all sorts of benefits. And one of the authors comment on the psychological aspect of this sort of by saying, quote, I think there is a large portion of the population who really do wish their purchasing decisions will reflect their values, but they're being misled essentially by the wrong information. And I don't think that's an accident. And I will say, in terms of leading people in certain directions, this study was not funded by Big Bean or anything like that. The authors declare no conflicts of interest. Anyway, so I hope you found all of that good news as satisfying as I did, and share below if there's any other good news that I missed that's even more important maybe than some of the stories I mentioned. And I will say special thanks to Elena from precisionfermentedfood.com for oftentimes sending me these positive stories, keeping me in the loop. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.